Mad Rat Dead is a hybrid rhythm platforming game. The story follows an unnamed rat that seeks revenge on the human that dissected and killed him. Brought back to life by a rat god, the self-proclaimed Mad Rat is dead set on accomplishing his goal, no matter what stands in his way. Mad Rat is kind of feeble though. He's a little sluggish after being revived, but can harness a newfound strength and agility by listening to the palpitations of his heart. He can dash, jump, duck, and charge up his moves as long as it's in tandem with the beat, which happens to match up with the beat of whatever song is playing. One of the unique things I like about the game is that it doesn't punish the player for skipping a beat, at least not in the same way a typical rhythm game does. While mistiming a jump to a beat will result in a combo loss, it doesn't throw the player off as bad as in other rhythm games. It's pretty easy to recover and get back into the flow of a level without having to restart. The game isn't on rails, like a lot of games in this genre tend to be, so the speed at which two players can reach the same area might differ depending on how carefully they could be playing. This comes with plenty of advantages and disadvantages. For instance, some gimmicks are based around timers, and the speed and precision one player might be able to do these parts can differ from someone not as confident in their skills. Rather than gate the more cautious player out, or force them to memorize all of the beats and jumps perfectly, the game will allow for space to methodically approach these few challenges. A less experienced player can get through it all, but it won't look as cool or graceful as someone who puts in more time. If the player does happen to die by missing a jump or accidentally crashing into an enemy, they're given the option to rewind the level a little bit to reset their position. This doesn't reset the song though, and it will pick back up at wherever it left off when Mad Rat died. This can be both a blessing and a curse. Later on, the beat will periodically change, making some areas really hard when a song slows down. I like the challenge this kind of design provides, but I also feel like I had a fair share of cheap deaths. Mad Rat doesn't have to move at every single beat, but he can't move unless there is a beat present. Also, there are a decent amount of gotcha moments where there's no way the player would be able to predict an enemy dropping on them or a part of the stage shifting on them during their first playthrough. The player can always rewind, but it still doesn't feel good to have that happen. Later stages aren't as lenient about how often the player can rewind. Mad Rat's health is measured by the total number of beats he's given in each level, and there are several stages where the leeway given with spare beats is pretty sparse. Rewinding does not return any lost beats, but a player can continually retry a tricky section as much as they want as long as their counter hasn't hit 0. Total remaining beats does factor into the end of level grade, but said grades don't actually mean much. It's mostly an ego thing to say you've hit a perfect score on every level in Mad Rat. I also ended up learning a lot of really important lessons the hard way. The game uses the first stage to quickly teach the player all of Mad Rat's movement options, but fails to inform the player about the specifics of each move. For instance, if Mad Rat is spinning mid-jump, he can lock onto and attack enemies if the player hits jump again, which will then reset his jump to help him cross gaps. If Mad Rat is not spinning, he'll still lock onto enemies but fall like a rock instead of resetting himself. This is a pretty important technique to master for some of the later stages, and the game doesn't teach the part about Mad Rat needing to be in a spin in order to attack. Considering how thorough the introductory level is, I can't believe something this important was skipped over. Mad Rat Dead uses an entirely original soundtrack for all of its stages, and each song is catchy in its own way. Most songs are, understandably, pretty fast-paced to give the player options with their platforming, but there are a couple of slower options too. A lot of the music has a jazz style to it, so it's really fun to listen to, and I'm a little sad that the soundtrack for the game was only sold with the collector's edition. Another little bit I like is that free play allows for mixing and matching stages with songs. Most stages seem to play best with their intended tracks from the story mode, but the opportunity to experiment around is nice. I find that the music fits the game's visual style as well. The upbeat jazz and pop mixes well with the cartoony style of the characters and enemies. Everyone looks nice and vibrant, and most importantly, this style helps both Mad Rat and his enemies stand out from the background. It's often hard to assess what is where when moving to the beat, so having the characters pop out visually removes a lot of otherwise unwanted confusion. The backgrounds are also very pretty. It can be hard to admire them mid-stage, but I often found myself looking at all the little details during cutscenes. This game really resonated with me a lot more than I thought it would. I expected the concept to be interesting for the first few levels and eventually get stale, but between the story, the soundtrack, and the flashy and fun gameplay, I stuck with Mad Rat Dead for several long sessions in a row. Rhythm games are some of the most hired and easily regurgitated games in terms of design. A lot of different rhythm games released in 2020, but pretty much all of them came down to hitting buttons in the proper order. In fact, I think most rhythm games just kind of come down to hitting buttons in the proper order. There's nothing wrong with this style, it's a fun way to play music-focused games, but it feels like I'm just swapping out the soundtrack and keeping the same gameplay for most of these titles. Mad Rat Dead challenges that by finding a way to mix in platforming elements. Sometimes it works, and sometimes it doesn't, but I think the game succeeds in creating a fun and unique experience while having a bunch of interesting aesthetic bells and whistles.